Hi, good afternoon, ladies, and then hello as well for the online attendees. Welcome to the session of Tomorrow is Too Late. The time for digital transformation is today. My name is Henry Martasari. I am a master student in cognitive science and education at Columbia University, and I will be serving as your chair session today. And you'll be hearing a presentation from Andreina Parisi Amon from Engagely, San Francisco, USA. And allow me to give an overview about Engagely. Engagely is a comprehensive learning environment proposed built for higher ed by educators, technologists, and entrepreneurs to foster active, collaborative learning and deeper peer-to-peer connections. And then Andreina Parisi Amon is a Vice President Learning and Teaching. We will have her here to present about the topic today. And then we will have around like 30, 40 minutes, maybe max. And then we will have a Q&A session afterwards. But if you prefer Adrena, it's up to you. If you want to have like a question and answer in between, you can lead that. For online attendees, feel free as well to write down your question in the chat box. And then without further ado, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone, both in person and remote, that is joining us today. I know it is the end of a long set of days and, of course, the end of the week. So it's exciting to be here with all of you to talk. And as Henry said, we'll have time at the end for questions, but also I invite you to interrupt, to ask questions, to be part of this conversation as we go. Because as with all learning, really doing so collaboratively is the best way to go. And so to kick off really this conversation and this session for us today, wanted to get a quick sense of who are you, who's in both the virtual and in-person room, and what brought you here today. And so I know we have a mix, and I don't think folks that are in the room have are on devices. So I was going to say, go ahead and put in the chat if you're in virtually, but you can also feel free to just jump up if you're here in person and want to share. And I'll give folks a little bit of time to respond. In the interim, only fair that I share the same for myself. As per the introduction, I'm Andrina. I have the privilege of leading the learning and teaching team at Engagely. I think my team has one of the most fun jobs in that we sit right at the intersection of partnerships and engineering. So in between folks like yourselves, educators, folks that are thinking about what does it mean to be teaching, to be learning, and how can we provide the best experience for you and for all of your learners, and then working really closely with our engineering team as well to say what needs to be built, both for the work that's happening today in classrooms and learning spaces across the world, and in the future. And so that's really what brings us to the Learning Ideas Conference, and to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is that evolution of learning, and what that looks like. Awesome. Okay. And so jumping right in to this idea of the evolution, right? Technology that has supported teaching has continued to grow and evolve, as has teaching itself, as we've learned more, as we've been able to dive into the science of learning, and as the needs on educators and for learners has changed. So, even before where this slide starts, where it was more of just that one-to-one tutoring mentality, as we tried to grow and expand to make learning more accessible and effective and available to more learners, we've changed the technology that we've had. So we've moved from a one-to-one to more of a one-to-many. And even within that one-to-many, bringing in the classroom Blackboard so that everyone can be seen, moving those materials to be reusable, and then ultimately shareable and editable, right? All of these have been to support the instructors and learners in growing what this experience is like. And then as we're moving even further, we wanted move into a whole new space where now we're able to bring back some of what was really valuable of the peer-to-peer, the one-to-one, the small groups, and have much more of a many-to-many environment. As we saw over the past couple years in the mix of this, right? We've moved into the online space, we moved into hybrid and synchronous and asynchronous, some intentionally and some because that was the necessity of the time. And we saw that many of the tools that we were using were being preset, kind of press fit into that space. But when we wanted to be able to create really this collaborative, interactive, two-way learning environment that we've seen from the science is most valuable, that technology wasn't there. And so that's what we at Engagely are out to create and have been able to support universities throughout this past year in starting to implement. And one of the core features of the work that my team does, but really that underpins everything at Engagely, is the fact that, as Henri said, we are purpose built. And so we start from the question of what is the purpose of education? What are the challenges learners and students are facing? And how do we build tools that really aim to support that? Because the learning is always going to happen between learners and educators, but technology can help make some parts of that a little bit easier. And so for those that are here that are interested in participating, and that as you've been actively thinking about this question over the past few days and most likely much longer than that, curious to hear what it is that folks envision in this continued evolution, or what you all are looking to create. So if anyone wants to raise a hand or put in the chat, I'll circle back and we can open up that discussion. In the interim, again, I will go ahead and share as we think about, those challenges for the learners, those challenges for educators, where we focus. It's in a few different areas. So one is for learners on the ability to access really supportive, active applied learning. And so we know from, learning science that active learning, where students are able to engage with the content, to build new knowledge, to then apply that new knowledge to new environments, is really critical and leads to more effective learning. But we know that can also be challenging, right? It puts learners to work, and learning is hard. And so creating that supportive environment in which learners are being guided, they're doing this in community, is really critical to that being effective. And so that leads to challenge number 2 of making meaningful connections. And so how to, regardless of the space in which you're in, to help learners connect with each other, with the instructor, with the material, in a way that is meaningful and leads to then that camaraderie that can take people through. And so one of the critical things that has been seen over the past couple years is just how valuable flexibility in learning is. And I think these are things that have been known, over time, but were just brought to the forefront and really had a spotlight shined on them over the past couple of years. And so this flexibility, has to do with whether it's the location in which you're in, when you're able to dedicate time to your learning, what it is that you're learning, or how it is that you're engaging, if it's written, if it's verbal, if it's on video, if it's in person, right? All of these components, leaving this choice to the learners, is really powerful in terms of being able to bring them in, and to give them the ability to take ownership over their learning. But often this notion of flexible and asynchronous has led to alone, and trying to go at it alone. And that is somewhat orthogonal to the challenges above. And so really bringing those pieces together for learners, to bring in that flexibility, but with camaraderie around active learning. When we look at this then on the educator side, on the instructor side, right, one of the core challenges is then being able to provide that motivating, and then being able to enable that active and applied learning. that's hard. It's a different mindset than what many of us were initially trained in terms of sharing new knowledge with learners, but really providing for them the opportunity to create and apply that knowledge themselves. And then alongside that, what that looks like in a supportive environment is going to be different for each learner. And so being able to know who is struggling in what space is really critical to providing not just the active learning environment, but one that is supportive. And we want to do that in a really inclusive way, right? Understanding that there are things that we see and can't see that are impacting how students are able to learn and the challenges that they might be having. And alongside all of that, then, as we think about this from the instructor perspective, is how to minimize the operational load. So, when we were in one modality, primarily in person, there was a lot of connection with individual students, trying to read their body language, read their faces. As classes got larger, that got to be more challenging. As we went online, that became sometimes impossible. But it's actually opened up new doors. And so, this notion, kind of fundamental to all of these pieces is that technology can and should carry some of that load when built in a learning centered way, such that the educator gets to focus on the education side and not collecting all of those data points or setting up the activities, but on really driving, motivating, and supporting learners through the learning process. And so curious, I see we've had a few more people join. If there are others that are interested in sharing, as you reflect on that, as you heard some of those pieces, if you want to put in the chat or, raise your hand in the live room in terms of are your biggest challenges in thinking about the digital transformation and that evolution of technology similar to what we've been focusing on? Are there others? Are there corollaries? Really interested in hearing what folks think. All right, I will leave that question in your mind. As I know it is tricky at the end of the day, but please, as I said, feel free to jump in, to put your thoughts in the chat, or to interrupt, as this is a collaborative space. All right. So when we jump into that, then as in thinking about battling all of those challenges, right? We start thinking about strategies that educators can use alongside that, and then building the underpinning of the platform that can make that possible. And so today we're going to talk about a few strategies that are really focused on bringing that active learning to life in an environment that may be hybrid, may be purely online, could even be purely in person. And how do we bring those pieces together without overloading the instructor on the operational load, and bringing together learners? And so starting from the onset of keeping learning groups small to really foster that peer-to-peer learning and the ability for community. And this can go beyond even, the goal here is not to just have small classes, but even in your large classes to be able to have small groups that come together. As we've seen that those smaller learning groups, really, roughly 5 people is somewhat ideal, 4 to 5, from a conversational perspective, where everyone can contribute, or no one is feeling singled out or left out. And that is where people start to form deeper connections. They can feel more comfortable, which is critical to then being able to ask questions that is going to lead you to that deeper learning. And so in the Engagely platform, one of our fundamental components is our virtual tables. And so as an educator using a virtual table, you can decide the size up to 10, because definitely beyond 10 now you're starting to get past the small group space, and into a larger conversation. And so within those small groups, you're able to build out collaboration communities, so learners can engage with each other while still participating in the full class and without interrupting or impacting the learning of those at other tables. They're able to chat via written chat specifically with their table or individual learners, or to the whole group as well as verbally chat. And then they also can have whiteboards, documents that you want them to be collaborating on that are all at that table level. And so in that way, really making it a seamless experience between talking to and having the whole class engage together, or moving into smaller group discussions. This makes some of the key active learning activities really straightforward to do in the online or hybrid space, in terms of just doing a turn and talk or a think pair share. So activities that were often really comfortable for us to do in person, that then got really complicated in the online space, are no longer so. Alongside that, then, is being able to use real time feedback to respond to your learners, and to be there in that supportive environment then that you need. And so, as we were talking about, as classes got larger and there was the ability for instructors to really move into this one to many environment, um, it sometimes became even more difficult then to connect or to know where each learner stands. And so, built in to the engaged classroom is the ability for learners to provide really quick in the moment feedback that is unknown to their peers. So, with a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, for example, peers only get a general sense of the classroom. They don't know who is responding what, but the instructor is able to see specifically who answered yes or no to that question. From there, you can go back to using tables and then thinking about, oh, do you want to bring groups of people together? Is there differentiated instruction that would be valuable? Or are you just trying to get a pulse of the classroom? So all of those take some of the guesswork out of trying to read someone's body language, and whether they're at the back end of the auditorium, or with their camera off, you can still get that sense of feedback. Additionally, within the space, there are non-active cues that we're able to use to provide feedback to instructors as well. So whether it's telling you, who has had the most talk time or the least talk time, who's been participating in other ways, to let you know who it would be valuable to further engage with or to reach out in a different medium. Corollary to this idea of being able to kind of follow up or get a personal sense, an individual sense of how each of your learners is doing, is being able to use frequent formative assessments to evaluate understanding, to see again if there is need for differentiated instruction, and also to help the learners recognize their own learning space. And so for them to see, are they understanding, are they not, and what that means. And so here is an example: just easily integrated polls and quiz questions in which learners can participate both live during a synchronous session as well as asynchronously if they missed a session or couldn't join it, in which they're still able to see the answers of their peers, and continue to engage in that way and deepen their learning. Another key component, and I think again this is something that has been learned over time, but was really highlighted over the past couple of years, is giving students flexibility in the when and how they communicate, both with each other and with you as the educator. And so really important to this is for creating those inclusive and supportive learning environments where not everybody is comfortable kind of raising their hand and speaking in front of a group of 100, or even virtually raising their hand and talking to the whole class, in an online platform. And so being able to provide the ability for learners to share their answers or ask their questions via chat can be very powerful. Additionally, in Engage, we have also the Q&A, which not only allows anybody to ask or answer a question, but also allows for that to come through anonymously. And so, as research has shown in other settings, we're seeing it similarly in classrooms that are hosted on Engagely, that more learners feel more comfortable asking questions through that anonymous setting. And then you can imagine, as they build up that muscle, they see how their questions are responded to, then they can build up that confidence to asking them non-anonymously and beyond. And so that is just one way in which you can further build out and create an environment in which learners feel safe and secure, which is what then allows them to open up their brains and be in a position for learning. Because none of us can learn when we feel scared or unsafe. And then alongside that is the ability to and the recognition that we can only really change and improve what we're measuring. Otherwise, we're changing and guessing, but not really knowing if it is having the desired outcome that we're looking for. And so built into the platform, and both in, if learners are accessing it while being in person in the class, or in a remote way, or even in an asynchronous way outside of a live session, there is a lot of data that can be collected in terms of how much students are talking to each other, to the whole class, the questions that they're answering, are they raising their hands, when are they participating in class versus not. That can give you a really rich picture, both at the individual student level as well at the class-wide level, that can allow you not only to reach out as needed, but also to think about iteration in the learning content, whether it's semester over semester, course over course, or if you're doing this from an onboarding, a new employee onboarding, for example, from cohort to cohort. And so a lot of richness that is available in that experience. Uh, and then, really our last kind of underpinning piece here is that idea of supporting all students regardless of their circumstance. And so again, this goes back to that idea of flexibility, of recognizing that everybody is coming from different environments, different circumstances, different comfort levels. And so being able to give the ability for learners to interact, written or verbal or audio or video, but also in person, remotely, or asynchronously, but providing some of the guidelines and the community with which to do that. One of the key components of the Engagely asynchronous experience, or outside of class experience, is to remove the aloneness. And so whether you are going back into a recorded session to better understand something that you heard while you were there live, or because you missed it, for because you weren't feeling well, you can do that on your own, but you can also do that with a group. And so joining together, coming into an Engagely study hall room, and having those same abilities to collaborate and communicate across learners. So let me pause there for just a minute. If there are any questions, either on the, thinking about the needs for active learning, or how we've incorporated some of that into the platform. And then I'm also excited to share a brief video, just a few minutes, that gives a little bit more of an overview of the Engagely classroom itself, while we were just talking about more from the active learning perspective.
Is there any question perhaps so far? Folks here in the in person still will postpone me perhaps maybe later the question. Let's see if there's any question in the chat.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will go ahead and excuse me, I'll stop my screen share and I'll put in the video and then give you all a chance to.
Welcome to Engagely, the premier comprehensive learning environment purpose-built for higher education. The disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic caused most institutions to turn to video conferencing solutions to facilitate remote learning. Seeing the need for an engaging, active, and flexible virtual learning environment, Engagely was purpose-built for educators by educators. This means Engagely was built from the ground up to provide instructors and learners with the tools they require for effective learning and teaching, and the engaging digital experience they deserve. Engagely is a video-based teaching platform designed for active and collaborative learning. We believe that your virtual classroom can be active, engaging, social, and flexible, and our mission is to deliver superior teaching and learning experiences that optimize learner success. Created for flexibility and scalability, Engagely supports all teaching modalities and hundreds of learners concurrently without the loss of audio or video quality. Engagely promotes inclusivity and equitable access for learners regardless of location or technology. All learners can access Engagely, whether they live in remote areas, have slower internet connections, or use older computers. Learners can easily access their Engagely classrooms from a variety of devices, including laptops, tablets, and mobile phones. Based on active learning principles, one of Engagely's unique features is the small group experience created using virtual tables of up to 10 learners each, increasing collaboration and learner-to-learner interactions while class is in session. We know it can be challenging to create the warmth of an in-person classroom in a virtual setting. On Engagely, instructors can walk the classroom to visit tables, meet with learners one-on-one, and collaborate with small groups, all while maintaining a sense of connection with all the learners in the class. The Engagely classroom fosters presence and compassion in an interactive social learning environment. Integrated interactive tools and engagement metrics gauge learner understanding and participation to provide real-time feedback to help instructors make informed instructional decisions. Engagely also provides an analytical view of learner progress and participation based on in-class activities, group work, and engagement to improve learner outcomes backed by data. Engagely is comprehensive yet uncomplicated. It easily integrates with popular learning management systems to simplify class management. Integrated collaborative documents and whiteboards encourage collaborative work as a class or in small groups, without learners having to open a new tab or navigate away from the classroom. Most importantly, it reduces the cognitive load of the instructor. Welcome to the next era of teaching and learning. Engagely, where engaged learning happens.
With that, that is the end of what I was aiming to share proactively, and so happy to take any questions.
Hi there, Andreina, and really enjoyed your presentation. Thanks for that, and really also like the video with all the tools that you've established for your service area. I'm from World Health Organization, which is the United Nations body in health, and now over the pandemic in the past 2 years, we've actually had to, not that we wanted to, but now we are true believers. We've transformed totally ourselves. So we've turned all of our workforce trainings, and this is internal staff capacity, health emergencies, epidemics, outbreaks, pandemics, you name it. So our learning programs have gone from what used to be old normal face-to-face into the formats. And I think we've second year into this process, we are really positively surprised that for kind of a non-profit public sector funded international organization like ours, we've actually increased the number of non-usual suspects that come to the trainings, meaning women, those from least developed countries, from humanitarian kind of a complex emergency settings, because actually though we see they struggle even with the simplest Zoom access, so we can't have cameras on for them or not, but still they attend, and this was like kind of the complete change in that when it was like more privileged and expensive to come to the face-to-face trainings, we used to have the male older men from Anglo-Saxon countries. And that's just normal business, normal for us. Like this is the training audience that we always have, and small scale, really small scale. So in a year, probably we could train 100 in health emergencies leadership program at max. Now we are going with investment, weeks-long sessions, digitized, all that running, but we are able to cater up to 300 people a year. So we've also tripled, and I don't think we've reduced the quality. We have in the intensive sessions, synchronous sessions twice a week, 2 hours non-stop in different languages, etc. We don't get any tools like yours, like activation tools and joint kind of documents and all that. We're still in the kind of an early phase of rolling out simplest packaging so that we can manage it with the in-staff personnel. And in my interest, it's kind of a see that what it takes the leap to the next level, noting that we operate in low bandwidth, no Wi-Fi, whatever context also. Like kind of elaborate, if you could elaborate a bit on the steps, like kind of what are the core elements, kind of like when digitizing. So you've mentioned this interactive, all that, but then to go to the next level, like in the, let's say in the workforce building, like we have trainings for our seniors in mission management, etc. So how do you see the journey from here on, if you have the vision to go forward? Like what kind of what are the trends, what's to happen next, from knowing that we are able to Zoom packets and have joint spaces, all that, but is there something that out of kind of a wildest imagination, what would come next, and what are you preparing for, unless this is a business secrecy?
No, absolutely. I think we're only going to get to do it if we do it all together. And so I love this question, and I love the story that you're telling here, and the reality of what has happened, right? Like this is where, part of online or hybrid shines in terms of that access and inclusivity, right? Like you can imagine why it is, learners are now coming. I mean, women, as we have seen, study and study again, right? Like the reason I am here instead of there with you is I have some kids at home that I couldn't get away from this time, right? Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. And so similarly, you're seeing that in the people that are now able to come into your, into your education spaces. And so, I think that is allowing you then to expand part of your mission. And so, when you talk about core elements or next steps, I would say one piece of it is embracing that, and then also thinking about what are the implications, right? So you did talk about some of the implications from the technical perspective, and I think that is really important, and that is a piece that we've worked on intensely to be like, okay, how do we run in low bandwidth environments such that low bandwidth doesn't have to then mean less interactive? Those can still happen together, but also what might that mean for your content, or for how you're presenting and getting folks to connect with each other across that content, right? Like, are there examples or questions or ways in which things were posed or asked when your primary audience was, Anglo-Saxon richer men, that might need to be different? Or is there a difference in background context that people have that may impact the type of introductory content or context you need to provide in what you're teaching? So I think that's one piece is from the content perspective. And then the other, when I think about kind of wildest dreams or next steps is how do you then, like, you have gotten the chance to scale in going from in-person to online, right?
Yeah.
How do you then scale, even like multiply that scale by going from you teaching everyone to what can each of the people that participate in your learning experiences then take back to their communities, right? So how are you empowering them? How are your, if possible, right, like your resources to be available, or for people that are in those learning experiences to be forming communities within themselves and a support network within themselves. And so as you bring in more collaboration, however that might be, in your learning, you're not only helping to solidify the concepts that you're teaching them, but then you're also giving them the opportunity to not just connect with you as the educator, but with each other, and then be able to build more from that experience.
Yeah, and that's really valid point what you say, in the before the pandemic time. So what used to happen, so what I could see in the 5 years that I was in this function, and I have a colleague here also who's joined the same activities, we could see that 1 in 50 learning participant actually became the multiplier who started running the same training again in Kyrgyzstan or somewhere else. So it was very few, even though we encourage, say, oh, you are leading your area, you are the infection prevention, you can now do this with your teams, all that. It was very seldom that anybody grew into that role. And I think in risk communications area, we had a few more, perhaps 4 out of 50 became the kind of really the next ones, the kind of a message bringers to that building this, the same kind of a learning experience in their own context or region or locality or professional area also. So now I'm wondering with this online, and this is the first time I ever think of it because of the pandemic burden on us.
Yeah,
on everything.
Of course. Oh, yes. And thank you. I should have started my answer with thank you for all the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if this online methodology gives an easier chance for these champions to go and retrain or rerun the sessions, like kind of rerun the programs. This is our wish that, for instance, other UN languages, Chinese, Spanish, French, Arabic, Portuguese, these other kind of groups that we are very Anglo-Saxon heavy. We have Francophone team members, but that's about it. We don't have really that reach and access to all, like even South American, it has to be in Spanish. So while we haven't yet cracked this nut, but I think in the next 2 years of programming and learning program planning and design, I think we are having to figure out how do we help those who are now really believers in this and have gone through the learning journey. How do they become the multipliers, and what is the capacity that is it like a what is it that how can we capacitate them so that they become really trainers of their own, and hoping that this online tools and means could make it easier for them, that you don't have that kind of old-fashioned logistics of an event to lift up. But I don't know yet how and I need to also revisit some kind of like ways of multiplying online learning, which already has, our curriculum has proven to work, and we can replicate it, but we are quite big team also to run it. So it's we don't have that luxury for all, like we can't put 4 or 5 people running a program for 10 weeks. So it's, I'm just looking like where the scale and where can we
absolutely. Well, and I'd love to talk to you about this, because it really is at the challenges that you're tackling, right, are at the intersection of kind of technology and then the learning science side, right? Because like, how do you do it effectively? And then what are the pieces that you can hand off to technology? And so I think some really interesting research that could shed some light on what you're saying is, when they started doing sort of recorded, like sending recordings of learning, like of lectures, right? And then when they had these study groups, the role of the facilitator was actually to stop the recording at certain points and have the folks that were there participating discuss amongst themselves to reach a certain discussion point, and that facilitator did not have to have the same level of expertise as the person that put together the materials and the videos and whatnot. And so there's obviously a lot of design into what goes into the recording, and then, you know, giving the facilitator the right stopping points and probing questions to ask. But in that way, right, like setting up some of those materials, I think could really help to expand some of the work that you're doing. And to your saying, empowering the folks that are willing to kind of jump up. And then also, one of the nice things about a video is being able to translate it, right? And so then you can have it dubbed. You don't have to like actually record it with 15 different people in 15 different languages if you don't have that expertise in house. And so that's one piece. And then I think the other is, are there ways to, again, help bring people together, even if they're not in the same place, or, you know, if they are, to allow them to do that. So, you know, for example, we had a group called iAfrica that works closely with a business school in Berlin, ESMT, that runs a summer program. And so they have groups of mathematicians in Africa that are in different spots. Those mathematicians gather together to do their learning, but they are, you know, on Engagely and then connecting with others, other groups of mathematicians, right? So then they're building their community there, but then also expanding their network to those that are in other communities. And so I think a setup similar to that, or something where people can all join the same like Engagely classroom individually without a live instructor, that also increases the flexibility that, you know, opens the door to somebody else being able to say like, yes, I will be the facilitator because you don't need me to go to this place or do it at this particular time. That could open that up. But happy to, you know, set up a moment to think more specifically about your scenario and kind of chart that out, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think this is something that also I'm of course interested also on the tool that you showed, because we can exchange it separately, just because, you know, what we are doing currently with about 200 plus participants, we are manually extracting the data of attendance from the Zoom sessions. La 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 la.
Yep. This is a story that is not only yours. I have heard it, and it's hard, right? But
everything starts manual. It's like a, you know, industry chain. But then, I mean, there are smart young people in the team who manage this. Like, they manage to automate the Excel extracts. But like, of course, I mean, this is the you know, the early stage of actions, that it's not really that advanced.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think we make do, and we do the best we can with the tools that we have at hand. And now the question is, as you've seen where it makes sense to go, how do we build and recruit and use tools that are actually going to take you to that next spot?
Super. So I saw your email there, so I'll just drop your line now so we can.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you so much for the question.
Have a nice Friday and weekend when it starts in San Francisco.
Thank you. You as well. Helen, I see your question in the chat, and it says, I'll read it out, that not everybody may have it, but around the real-time feedback component. And so elaborating a little bit on how to make that happen, if instructors observe all groups at the same time, and what that might look like. And so absolutely. So there are a couple of different types of real-time feedback that are available. And so I'll talk through a few of them. So one is when we're looking at this, where you have kind of these thumbs up, thumbs down indicators, or if you see where the circles are, those circles then can also show engagement. Those are engagement indicators. And so those are on a per learner status. And when you're looking at your kind of gallery or full classroom view of your learners, you can see and access that type of data. So each individual learner is either giving a thumbs up or thumbs down by interacting with the interface, or the engagement meter is filling up based on how much they are participating in different ways. So that's one thing, and that's something that the instructor can observe all at the same time. To the question about observing all of the groups at the same time, So here, when students are in their table groups and are collaborating in those groups, an instructor has a couple of different options. One, they can observe or join an individual table. And so in that way, they would also be hearing or just observing, which is an unobtrusive way to hear what those learners are talking about and what they're working on. And so then they can choose to jump in and provide feedback to that group individually, or to pull back up and say, oh, I was hearing this from a few different groups. Let me give some additional direction to the whole class. So that's one piece. The instructor does also have the option to listen to all the tables at the same time. Now there, I would say it becomes quite a cacophony, but it is particularly useful at the onset of different group activities. Similar to, when we were in the classroom, you would tell people to kind of turn and talk, and there's kind of this quiet, and then the din starts to pick up. You can hear some snippets of some words that sometimes tell you which table you might want to go support, and then it starts to come back down. And so you also have that option to evaluate or to engage with the learners that way. I'm not sure if I totally answered your question, and so feel free to add some more in the chat if there's more that would be helpful to explain. And I'm also happy if there are any other questions that folks have or that have come up. Looks like there's more. Okay, great.
Okay, that's very great explanation, and thank you for the questions, either from the in-person and also virtual. We still have a few minutes. I mean, we can wait for if anyone wants to ask more or like making some comments, other comments. This is very great presentation. Thank you, Andreina.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Yeah, happy to stay on a few more minutes, but also happy to get people onto their Friday afternoons. So,
yes, yeah. If anyone wants to ask further question outside this session, you can email Andreina as well. That's the email. Thank you again, Andreina, for the presentation. It was a pleasure to have you here. It was a pleasure to have all the attendees and for the comments and the question as well. We hope like you have learned and enjoyed the presentation today. And then you can always like rewatch this presentation after the session finish. Maybe like from like few days after the session, you can rewatch with the same link and the same website. Okay, thank you, Andreina. Hope to see you again next year, perhaps. And thank
absolutely. Will be my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.